Welcome to Mariefields, the home of the first permaculture farm in the world. It was here that Bill Mollison, the father of permaculture, developed his concept based on permanent agriculture to create the principle of permaculture. This amazingly strong 165-acre farming eco-environment stands as testament to the fact that no chemicals have been used on this land for over 30 years. There are over 20 dams on this property, all interconnected with pipes and drains. This ensures a huge residual water supply, and even during the dry drought seasons we had in the last couple of years, there was always an excess water at Mariefields. This front dam is near our apiary, and as you see the hives there, and around the edges of this dam we've planted grevilleas, flowering native grevilleas, and these provide a great source of nectar and pollen for the bees, as well as the insects, butterflies and birds. And also it's close to the manuka honey plantation, which we have on the opposite side to the apiary. Originally back in the 1900s, Mariefields was a dairy farm, and in front of us we have the original dairy, or the milking shed, that was built in the early 1900s, and it's now been converted into a caretaker's residence. In front of us here we have the original 1920 homestead, and this home was built with timber and logs that was cut from the property, and even after all this time, over 100 years old, it's in amazing condition. It has been renovated internally, but it's still, the external is exactly as it was. Here we are at the actual back of the milking shed, and you can actually see some of the existing structures of the old shed that's been filled in. And just to the right of the milking shed is the greenhouse, and this is where we propagate our plants and seedlings. Here we are at the homestead. We have the bird sanctuary dam, and this is an amazing area of land. It's an island in the middle of a moat. You probably can't see the water, but there's a lot of greenish on it, and there's about 3 meters of water here around this island, and we've planted it out with a lot of native trees, and we get a lot of wildlife in here that come down from the wildlife corridor. And even this big ficus that you see right here in front of us is an amazing food source, particularly for bats. We get a lot of native bats in here, and small micro bats as well, and they just love that tree. Here we are at the back of the bird sanctuary dam, and this time you can actually see some of the water here where the lilies are growing on top of the water. This leads into the wildlife corridor, and the wildlife corridor has been fenced on both sides so the cattle can't get in. And once the area is fenced off, we find that the native trees and shrubs and that grow very quickly, and there's, in actual fact, you can see some of the sallywattles, which are the primary trees, the bright greenish ones, and they form the base for the base canopy to protect the rainforest trees growing over. And then further up you can see these massive hoop pines. They're remnants of Gondwana land, and unfortunately they were covered with cat's claw creeper. We've cut the cat's claw creeper off at the base, and further up the wildlife corridor you can actually see the dead cat's claw creeper, and in the next big wind we have, they'll gradually fall off, and the tree will be able to, or the hoop pines will be able to grow to their full extent, and they live for probably hundreds of years. Some of these, we've already got some on the property that are well over 100 years old, so they're beautiful trees. Here we are still in the wildlife corridor. We're actually a little bit closer now to the hoop pines, and you can actually see the dead cat's claw creeper on those trees. But also what we've done beside the fence line here of the wildlife gully, we've put in 2 hectares of improved perennial winter grass, and this means that even in the winter time when the grass does dry, the cattle will be able to get quite good feed, and nothing is affected. The wildlife is not affected, the riparian zones are not affected, and the whole ecosystem is undamaged because of a large area of improved pasture. Here we are at the southern end of the wildlife corridor, and this is an area where we've allocated about over 10 acres to the koala forest. And in this area here we've planted about 4,400 koala food trees, which were planted a few months ago, and these link into this area links into the Border Ranges National Park, So hopefully as time goes by, the few remaining koalas in the national park will have food. And this is a big problem with the koalas, is that there looks like there's a lot of trees, but in fact the koalas only eat a few Pacific trees, and that's what we've done here. We've actually planted Pacific food trees for the koalas, and that's the 4,400 trees we've planted, which when we go up a little bit further we'll actually see some of them, and they've been in now several months and you can actually see the heights of them. We're at the mango plantation. This was established quite a few years ago by Mollison, and it's the perfect example of permaculture at work. You can see the contour, the cut. It follows the contour of the land. It's cut into the hillside, and the cut flows back to the hill. So when the water comes down the hillside, it fills in the cut and then slowly seeps down, and then the trees are planted on the low side of the cut. Now, we haven't had rain here probably for 3 weeks, and that's quite moist and quite damp in there. So that water is permeating down to the roots of those mango trees, and I suspect that this year we'll have an amazing crop of mangoes. Here we have some olive trees that have been pruned, fairly severely pruned. These were also planted by Bill Mollison a long time ago. And behind that you'll see the sign. There's a sign on one of the trees, Bamboo Boulevard. That walks down into an amazing bamboo boulevard where there's the migration dam, and that's a huge dam, and we get a lot of migratory birds come through 3 or 4 times a year. Here we have some of the koala food trees that are close to the electric fence, and you can see the growth rate of these is quite remarkable. They're probably several months old, but next year koalas would be able to get into those trees and hopefully find some nice gum leaves and have a nice meal. Here we have some native turpentine trees, which were remnants left over from the area when it was extensively logged in the 1900s. These turpentine trees are amazing trees. They're extremely water resistant, and they were shipped to England, and huge quantities of them taken out of this valley, shipped to England to make for the London wharves, and also they were used in the Suez Canal to shore up the banks of the Suez Canal. And this is all we have left on this, a small remnant population of turpentine trees. And in the distance you can actually see a stump. That is a cedar stump. This area was logged extensively for red cedar in the 1890s, and not much was left, and that's one of the few remaining stumps that we found on the property. There's 3 or 4 of them, and that stump is probably well over 100 years old. Here we are at the migration dam, which is actually in the Koala Reserve. And this huge dam is, as you can see in the middle, there's a huge number of reeds there. And we get a lot of large migratory birds. Right at the moment there's some wild ducks swimming around on it, but we get some big, like jabberoos. And they come down, they stay for just a few days and fly on. I'm not sure where they go to or where they come from. You'll notice around the edge of this dam there's a lot of bamboo, and there's a lot of bamboo in the permaculture concept, and the bamboo actually acts as a water retention, a barrier around the dams, and holds the ground together. So it's used extensively for that and for firewood and for food. The bamboo shoots a delicacy. Here's a logging truck from the 1960s. This was bogged here and just left behind. First of all, they logged for red cedar, then turpentine, and then in the 50s and 60s they came back and logged again for box gum or box tree, and they used the box tree to make wooden banana cases. And this was what this truck was doing up here when it got bogged. And as we move around we actually see another turpentine tree, another very large turpentine tree. And this is the native forest in here, which we're regenerating, and we've done a lot of work in there, and there's a huge number of native trees starting to pop up. Where we are now is one of the highest spots on the property, and in the early days this was called Truckee Stop, where the bullock drays used to stop and they'd catch their breath, have a boil of billy, have a cup of tea, and then they'd pull the cedar logs or the turpentine trees down to the creek or the river. There they'd ship them out from that area. Here you see this massive gum tree, and this is called a widowmaker, and you can actually see the branches where they've broken off, and it's fatal to stand under this tree because particularly after all the rain we've had, it soaks up the moisture, and the moisture fills into the into the branches. It starts to get a bit of heat and dries out, and then crack, and it'll drop on you. So never stand under one. In the distance there you can see Mount Warning or Wollumben, and this is a sacred site of the Bundjalung people, who are the original inhabitants of this area, and that's a sacred site. And as you can see, that's part of the magna plug that when the volcano erupted 20 odd million years ago. And when we zoom around, and you can actually see the rim, and so it's not a mountain range, it's actually the rim of the volcano, even though it looks like a mountain range. It's quite a huge caldera, and it's probably approximately about 15-20 kilometres across, and goes right around, and there's to the other section, which is the pinnacle behind us, which overlooks Mariefields. You can see a patch of dead camphor laurel trees. What we've done with these trees, we've ring barked them, and they've died off. And now what we're going to do is, in the next couple of months, when they're a little bit dead, a little bit deader, we'll drill holes in them, and they'll be home for gliders and birds and a lot of the parrots. And actually you can see some of this fencing here. This is part of our rotational grazing for the cattle, so we keep the cattle out of the riparian zones, and all the environmentally sensitive areas, the core environmental areas, are all blocked off from cattle, so they don't cause any damage. And this is just part of the fencing process. In front of us here we have a massive big dead old gum tree. It's an iron bark, actually. It's a dead iron bark, and there's not much on it at the moment, but in the breeding season that tree is just absolutely alive with parrots. There must be dozens of little holes in it, and they all find a little space to lay their eggs, and that's the importance of these dead trees. They're just so important in environmental protection. Here we are with a row of pomegranates that was also planted by Bill Mollison, and this year, you can see the yellow bottles or the yellow containers. That's to trap the fruit fly. We're just pruning these back now, and they'll start flowering probably in another couple of months, and by the end of Christmas, by Christmas time we should have fruit. Here we have the very unique straw bale barn that was also built by Mollison, probably 25 odd years ago, and the straw bale barn is environmentally perfect. It's cool, very cool in summer, and in the middle of winter it's quite warm. So we'll go inside and just have a look at it and see what it looks like inside. Here we are inside the straw bale barn, and actually you can see the thickness of the straw bales, and that's straw. And over the straw they've put chicken wire and then plaster and render, and then we've painted it white. So it's quite a unique building. It's a beautiful building, and very unique. Here we have the original map that Bill Mollison put together when he worked out his permaculture water flows from the 20 odd dams, and you can see the lines and the structures running into the swales and the contours. And from that we then did up a environmental property plan for Mariefields, which is quite a detailed plan, which brought in the core environmental areas like the fish ponds, the islands, the koala habitats, and the native forest and wildlife gullies. So we've incorporated the whole idea that Mollison had. We've incorporated it into our property plan and value added it. Adjacent to the straw bale barn, we have the farmstay building. This is quite a large building. It accommodates up to 10 guests, and overlooks the fire pit, and just a very, very nice part for people to stay. Between the farmstay building and the caretaker's dwelling, we have a very large food forest, and in this food forest we have quite a range of trees, and this was all part of the permaculture principles. We have a lot of citrus, mandarins, oranges, grapefruits, lemons, limes. We have a macadamia tree in there, jackfruit, avocados, and on the edges we have our little market garden with vegetables and herbs. So and right in front of us here is a coffee tree. So there's quite a lot of different food sources here, different trees, different fruit trees, and that makes it quite sustainable for a lot of different fruits and vegetables during the year. Important part of permaculture is free-range chickens, and here we have free-range guinea fowls and a lot of free-range poultry and ducks as well running around, and they provide a rich nutrient source to the soil as well as consuming ticks and insects. Here we have some of the original swales that Bill Mollison installed, and the idea of these is that they actually fill up with water. They've already been full of water recently, so they're quite wet at the bottom, and the system was that they would grow along the top, and vegetables and that would running vegetables would run down into it and that type of thing. But we're in the process now of resurrecting these, and hopefully in another year or so we'll have these fully functional. Over there further you can see the creek, and that's the South Pumpkinbill Creek that runs through the property with the platypus pool. We have platypus in the creek, and also that's an amazing mountain stream of water. One of the mountain pools we have on the property, and we have platypus in these swimming holes, which is quite remarkable. They're pristine, the water, absolutely beautiful and clear. It's quite deep. The pool doesn't look shallow, but in fact actually it's quite deep. So beautiful, clear, crystal mountain water. I hope you've enjoyed our tour at Mariefields, where we have continued to develop the permaculture infrastructure of Bill Mollison with his production of sustainable organic food products. We've expanded on Bill's ideas and created a long-term sustainable economic environment with focus on wildlife and native habitat, while at the same time providing organically grown produce. We are located in one of the largest natural erosion calderas in the world. We are an internationally significant environmental area with one of the highest biodiversity areas in Australia. It is important that we have this strong conservation strategy in place to protect our area. We welcome you to stay at Mariefields and experience firsthand this remarkable eco-environment.